Is there any plans to make this playable on PC, or is this strictly mobile forever?
The current plan is to be on mobile, both Android and iOS. We don't have any plans at the moment to do PC. Do you guys not have phones?
Yeah, you guys all have phones.
Video games are the only form of art where, even if the creative process is more akin to artistic tendencies, the overall experience from developers and consumers alike is treated more as a product rather than a piece. And the reason for that comes from one of the core things that makes a game, and that's because, unlike most forms of art and media, the user has a direct influence over the experience in a process to us known as interaction. Good interaction brings the player into the world crafted, keeping immersion, and is key to a successful video game, so much so that if that aspect of the game isn't well received, then the game won't be. But the question is, with a world filled with so many different people of all sorts, should it be? If you've ever been a hardcore fan of anything or anybody in a competitive space, likely you've felt a rush of emotions linked to the success of that person or thing. You feel a great sense of joy when it does well, or a great sense of dread when it fails. A sense of duty to try to fix issues you see in them, and a sense of pride when they've battled through adversities, even though you've got little or nothing to do with any of those things. This human feeling is linked to the concept of identification. Identification is a psychological process whereby the individual assimilates an aspect, property, or attribute of the other and is transformed wholly or partially by the model that the other provides. It is by means of a series of identifications that the personality is constituted and specified. The roots of this concept can be found in Freud's writings, and the most common of them is primary identification. Primary identification is the original and primitive form of emotional attachment to something or someone prior to any relations with the other person or object. So naturally, due to how personal video games are with writing the player into the space or world created, it's only second nature for the really good ones to invest the user emotionally into that space. This emotional attachment is what's pushed for any designer. They want the player to be invested in their world, care about their characters, enjoy the immersive experience to the fullest, though this feeling of identification is actually something crafted from the lowest level of development in the concepts of marketing and iteration. Both of these things are crucial in selling games and are both built around the idea of community.
But it's very useful all the same. So at any one time, there is always this big thing that helps sell video games, right? So years ago, it used to be people were saying, you got to get press, you got to get all the press to talk about your games. And then people were saying, no, get the YouTubers, get PewDiePie to play your game and you'll make a bunch of money. And then it was Twitch streamers. And at this point, all of these things are still pretty useful. You know, you still want to be getting press and YouTubers and Twitch streamers playing your game. But really, at the moment, the thing, at least from my perspective, and it seems like from a lot of other people are realizing this as well, is that community building is the thing that's really driving players to buy your game right now. Community building always has been, you know, over the years, there's always been forums and I guess IRC before then. There's always been a lot of games that have had massive buzz around them. A lot of the time, they have had a nice community presence.
What is the sense of community? This concept was developed by McMillan and Chavez, and they state that a sense of community can be broken down into 4 key elements. Membership, which defines who is in the community and who is out. It shows that people value the sense of belonging which comes with being identified as a member. Influence, which is the notion that my voice counts. When you speak, others listen and often act on your advice. Fulfillment of needs, which relates to how people belong to a community to satisfy one or more of their own personal needs or goals. And emotional connection, which is essentially identification, which was mentioned prior to this. A sense of community is essential for a successful, ongoing, sustainable community and is a powerful tool used in game development, so much so that this tool is the backbone of a lot of really successful games today. Communities built over decades whose reach fills tons of companies from dev to end user, all with marketers pushing content built to appeal towards members of that community that they're trying to foster and entice. But with the inclusion of influence and fulfillment of needs in a medium that could undergo such fluid iteration often comes a perversion of vision the game dev had originally had. Sometimes it's for better. Even though they create, the dev is still human and they can have bad ideas that need to be taken out, adjusted, or modified. But sometimes it's for worse. The community of consumers are people too, all with differing ideas, skills, and backgrounds. And like any good chef will tell you, too many cooks in the kitchen can spoil the broth. And often the outcry of the community can drown out the original creator's intentions, and often as the game dev, as the artist, at the end of the day, the game is sold as a product. So naturally, you make decisions you might not want to better appeal to the sales at the cost of vision, which sometimes can be for good, but often people assume it's always for good, and in a lot of cases, it's not.
So it was clear to us that we had to change the narrative of the game. People were playing Monaco thinking it was expecting one type of game and they weren't getting it, so they were dissatisfied. So when we made the decision to change our narrative of Monaco, we spoke to various press outlets and we told them, you know, Monaco isn't a stealth game. Up until that point, we were saying stealth, but we didn't realize that people were misinterpreting what our intentions were. It's a game that's heavily inspired by the stealth genre, and it has heavy stealth moments in it, but we wanted to deconstruct the genre, take what we enjoyed about it, and add other elements of other genres to make a game that we wanted to play. When we talked to press, we told them it's not a stealth game, and why we felt like it's still fun despite not being a stealth game. So the first thing I did was I wanted to tell people about this idea because it's so brilliant. And the first feedback I got was, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. You're going to injure yourself. And you're the most retarded person I've ever met. So this was devastating to me. Because I was expecting a different sort of feedback. And I'm sure a lot of you people can relate to that where you go and you tell people about your game that you've been working on and you're so passionate about, and the feedback that you get is sort of the opposite of what you were expecting.
Recently, a fairly divisive game has hit the community called Elden Ring that's received glowing praise across the board from consumers, reviewers, and devs alike. This game, being a Souls-like game, brings a fresh take on an already well-known subgenre that already breaks the mold with an incredibly aggressive and strong community behind it. And whether you loved it or hated it, there's something incredibly interesting about the way this game was produced and released. The devs of this game took a lot of creative direction with the ideas and mood they wanted to set. Things like not including a pause menu or taking on a lot of the UX direction most games have. leaving some fans of games who suffer from fear of missing out to decide to pick it up despite not being their type of game, some of which complain about it gatekeeping with the design choices that the devs have chosen to take. And I understand the feeling. I'm also horrible at those kinds of games, and I don't have the patience nor the time to download the boss's movesets and develop the skills to beat them with that knowledge. Hearing Get Good can be incredibly frustrating to hear, especially with a game that's touted as being an early Game of the Year contender and you just want to enjoy the experience alongside everyone else. But that doesn't mean the devs have to change their design decisions to match what you want. But a lot of devs feel like they have to do that regardless of that fact. For some reason, when the liberties are taken in the gaming space to decide to further fit the immersion of the world rather than the ease of use, much like the decisions made in Elden Ring to make it a more involved experience by taking away the gamification features, it's usually met with backlash. And that kind of feedback, although not present in Elden Ring much, is what presents a polarizing issue in game development, and that, unlike many other forms of art, the consumer holds a lot of power over the way games are made. And a lot of people assume the devs just throw this stuff in there and they wonder why more games like Elden Ring aren't created, and that's because you guys, the consumers, dictate what actually happens. But is that for better or for worse? Well, it's complicated. Now, before I begin, the consumer having a little power over the game's lifecycle is totally fine. If you're making a product, which most people are that make a game, gathering community feedback and iterating off of design is a powerful tool that so very few industries get to utilize, and the gaming industry is the strongest at doing so. However, in terms of artistic value, it feels like with a focus on actually flipping a profit rather than crafting, things have become a lot more gamified as a result. But why is that? Well, several things factor into this. For one, it's important to remember that most game devs don't actually make games for themselves, but for their community. This is a fact across the board, whether you're AAA or indie, and that's because any game that wants to flip a profit, it needs to be treated as a product. And the key to selling any product is understanding your audience. These are people that are most likely going to purchase your game, so naturally, fostering a strong community and fulfilling one of the 4 pillars of sense of community, of fulfillment of needs to be hit. And that is why a lot of games cater towards those people. And I feel like having a strong community is perfect for getting the core concept features of your game down pat. Trying to see if a feature you created works well, is liked, and flows well with your game based on community reception is a great way to make sure that your game has what it needs, or in that area it needs improvement. Where it doesn't help a lot of the time is in balance. Balance is where everything usually goes to shit when it comes to game development, and that's because everyone has an opinion on it.
Yo, I have a question about the Aatrox rework. Can you guys please refer to twin items? I can't play the fucking game anymore! I'm begging you!
This can be broken down in a scale from easy to hard, but what defines those things is so ambiguous it's nearly impossible to define for every game. This could be an issue of ease of control, ease of counterplay, ease of visibility, ease of understanding. This could be simple numbers. Does this do too much damage or not enough? Is the cooldown too high? Does it move too fast? Or this could be an accessibility thing. Can they find this objective? Do they know where they're going? Do they need an indicator for this or that? And etc., etc. This can go on and endlessly, and is honestly the hardest part for any game to nail down. And that's solely because of the consumer and the fact that you can't please everyone. If it were up to one person, aka the person making the game, it would just be simple. They would attune it to their numbers and their numbers alone that makes them feel comfortable. Whatever vision they wanted to would be complete in an instant. That thing that one-shot you, intentional. That ability you can spam on end, totally made that way on purpose. But when it comes to crafting an experience catered towards an audience, what do you base it on? Most would jump up and say the average, but that's not true. Most game developers cater it towards the LCD, or the lowest common denominator. When most people hear this, they just assume the game dev is trying to find the largest reach for their game to get a crash grab out of it and be greedy, and they're not wrong.
Come on, get that money, 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 money. I don't come them.
But that's only one hand on the wheel, and it's not as black and white as it may seem. Make a game too unique and nobody wants to give it a chance. Make a game too difficult and most people will get frustrated with it and not play it after a few attempts, or don't have the time. Most people consider these decisions to be a form of gatekeeping, and the devs actively making these decisions to exclude people with the lack of skill or intellect to complete their experience. If you lack these things, either get good or don't play. It isn't a bad thing to want to make sure your game has the most reach to it that it can get. Gaining a growing interest in games only helps the industry because without a cash flow and profit, little to no games would be made at all, and that would not be good either.
It was a trick question. The tool most important to humanity's survival wasn't any of the 9 in the box.
Go on.
The most important tool is respect.
Gay!
There seems to be a grand lack of respect going around in general, but if we're to foster a positive future for game development, learning how to push and pull between what the consumer wants and what the dev wants is crucial. As a consumer, you have to know that as a dev, we listen a lot. There are very few instances where a dev flat out ignores their audience once, and it usually bites them in the ass in reviews and sales when that does happen. It's not enough to simply say you want something as a collective, you have to show it. If you don't put your money where your mouth is, those pretty words are meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Support those changes you want and show the industry that yes, this is the direction they should be going in. Those samey games you complain about on the daily sell really well. GTA 5 has been re-released 3 times in the last 8 years and always tops the charts in terms of sales. Skyrim has been released on every single piece of tech to exist, and not because devs don't listen to their audience, but because they do. As a community, you show what works and what doesn't, and if it doesn't, well, why take a risk on something unproven when what works well? This can sound frustrating as an individual who does show with their wallet what they like and what they don't, but that shouldn't dissuade you from continuing to support ventures you think are positive for the space, as well as acknowledging that you as a person have a very specific taste that doesn't speak for everyone. Challenging experiences might be fun to you, but they're not fun for everybody. Not everyone plays a game for a challenge. Some do it for leisure, some do it for relaxation, or some simply do it for the joy of playing the game, and that doesn't make their opinions any less valid than yours. Now as devs, well, you shouldn't be afraid to take a calculated risk every now and then, pushing back on everyone else's vision and making your own. Not everyone has the time, energy, finances, or skill to pull it off, but if you have any of those things, and it couldn't hurt, why shouldn't you? There's nothing wrong with making games you want, shutting off the world and making an experience that you and you alone are proud of despite what others might think of your vision. Is it practical to selling games? No, not at all. But the beauty of art is that it speaks where words are unable to explain. Before you give up on your idea after pitching it to somebody verbally, try making it. Prototyping something out makes a huge difference to not only the people you're trying to explain your crazy idea to, but also to yourself to truly understand it and show off what makes it great. And that happens without any risk at all. However, without taking risks, nothing grows.
The Jungle Gym concept in Free Heap was an attempt to capture how movement itself can be engaging and can provide a feeling of openness. There are many things you can do as a player to make spaces themselves more engaging, more fun, and more joyful. Case in point, the big ride from the end of the GRÄF Horde. So we knew throughout development that we were going to have this quest end in a high place and we needed Aloy to get off of a mountain. So I added this gigantic zip line. I put this in and I expected it to get cut every single time it went to review because it's crazy. But people got it. When they played it, they were like, wow, this is kind of fun. It's kind of joyful, and I kind of get it. I'm amazed that it's in the finished product, and I'm so happy that it is.
I don't think everyone should be doing this. No, not at all. Making games everyone wants to play is no small feat and just as fulfilling and fun as making something for yourself, not to mention essential for the industry. Listening to what the masses want and delivering is crucial and the strongest aspect of the game development community. But As a piece of this industry, listening to those small voices asking for something new is integral to keeping this wonderful thing of ours, well, growing.